Welcome to the Rocksolid Families Show. I am Linda Hutchinson alongside my husband, Merrill. How are you, honey?
I'm pretty good. I'm slightly tanned.
We had a little bit of sun.
I'd say I was slightly rested, but I'm not. I'm tired today. What's up with that?
Well, you're back into the grind.
I don't know. I think I'm just came back up to cold weather and yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So,
a couple weeks ago, we did a show about what part of your life are you losing in and how to start winning. And so we kind of had divided up the 8 areas of our life, our life into 8 different areas.
Right.
And we kind of hit on all 8 of those and talked about really the importance of them and the priorities of them. And one of them was what your favorite. Do you remember which one that was?
Well, you would say it's recreation. And
Yeah.
so would I.
I was going to say, and why am I wrong in that? Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, and that's kind of what originally we were talking about, doing a show on just the recreation side, but then we led into, well, let's look at all parts of our lives. But today we are going to just focus more on the importance of recreation, of having it in our life. And I think the reason for that is because sometimes we talk a lot about a lot of serious stuff. And one of the questions that I ask couples frequently is, when was the last time you guys had fun together? When was the last time you enjoyed each other? I mean, everything, especially when a couple is going through a challenging time, everything seems to be serious. And there is a time for seriousness. But if everything is always just serious, it gets too heavy. And people get tired of it. It's exhausting. It's not quite walking on eggshells, but it can get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's like, you know what? I'd rather just go off and be by myself if everything's always got to be this type of conversation or work or stress or whatever. It's like, so I think there's an importance of being aware and intentional about saying, no, we're unplugging. We're gonna get away from that, and we're gonna set some boundaries up on the work or the stress or whatever it is that's contaminating the relationship.
We're working on a training manual for our coaches. And in that training manual, you and I were traveling and I was doing some work on the road, and I put your 8 essential emotional needs in there, which you use a lot. And you've created this list based on what you work with and what you've seen over your decades of work. But when I AI it, there is one that we're missing on there. And it's blowing my mind that it wasn't on your list because it's fun and enjoyment.
Right.
On your 8 essential emotional needs, it is a part of, like you said, even as a couple, like when's the last time you had fun? Right. When's the last time you unplugged as a person? And so that's kind of what we're talking about today, unplugging.
I would use, you're right. I mean, it should be part of that. I think what happens is it's actually, I use it as a metric to see how the other ones are doing. If other ones are doing well, people will naturally be having more fun and enjoyment in life. And so that's why I asked the question.
Interesting.
Just tell me when the last time was you guys started that you had some fun. And, if they're like, never, well, that's one of my measuring sticks. It's kind of like how we would say, when was the last time you guys had sex? Sex is not on the essential, right? Like you better have it this many times a week, but we better be having, it's a metric that we use to see what the health of a marriage
Good point.
is.
It's like a byproduct
Yes.
of a healthy relationship, a healthy balance of life. And so, a part of it is I've unplugged from my computer today because we tried this past week to unplug and to do a lot of nothing as far as expectations and, booking the schedule. Because, last week we talked about the banquet and, it was crazy when I go back and I listen to that story and you guys can go back and listen to that podcast. Like I got emotional in there. And I said, I don't know why. And you said, because you're tired.
Right.
And there was some truth to that, because it had been a buildup of a lot of emotions, a lot of work, and a lot of focus and intentionality. And so you can't keep revving that engine at such a high pace and rate for a long, long time because it takes its toll.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So the question might be like, why do we keep revving at such a high rate? And I'm going to push back on some of this, because some of this I think might be, well, because there's work to be done. And my pushback would be, who created the work, right? Like, don't worry about tomorrow, because today's got enough to worry about itself. And that there's always enough work. And so I think sometimes we impose different things on us, like this has got to be done. I have to make this much money. I have to work this many hours. I have to make this quota. I have to. And it becomes the governor of our life. And we actually start to weigh ourselves and measure ourselves off of that. Carl and I on Strong Dads just did a show. It was based off of the documentary Bigorexia. And Bigorexia is a fantastic documentary. It's not rated G by any means. It's not a Christian documentary, but it's about the bodybuilding industry. And the bottom line is, when is big enough? Right? And so we impose, these guys went from working an hour in the gym to now working 5-6 hours in the gym, because I have to. And it's like, who are you pleasing? Is this pleasing to God? Right? And so I just think there's a big, you have to push back. There's a reason why we have a Sabbath that we talk about. And it's like, you're just not that important. You just don't need to work that much.
Well, and as one of my old bosses used to say, it takes a steady hand to carry a full cup. And so in other words, you've got to have that steadied approach and balance to life to be able to do a lot, because you can't keep revving that engine. You will blow the engine. And so part of the training manual we're working on with our coaches is all about self-care and about work-life balance, and that you can't keep giving and pouring out and then expecting to have anything left in the tank.
Right.
You've got to keep refueling. You've got to keep, balancing that out so that you can longevely be able to do what we do over a long period of time. Like, we want to have a long shelf life. I don't know if that's the right term for us, what we do.
So one of the things that we talk about is, how do I know if I'm pushing it too far, too hard in a particular area?
Good question.
And so, taking this back from Carl and I's show on the Bigorexia, is it wrong to go to the gym to work out? Is it wrong to have a job and work X number of hours a day? And the question or the answer kind of that we started to arrive at is, sometimes it's obvious when it's wrong, like when it's flat out unhealthy and you're exhausted and you can't get out of bed, and you go, okay, I think I've gone too far. But sometimes it's not as obvious. So you have to use other metrics to help you know whether you are in a good, healthy place. And so for us, it might be, what about the other things that we call important? Family life, right? Church life.
Exercise.
Recreation. Are those all coming at the expense of this? And if they are, then we start to say, oh, maybe it is time for us to unplug on all of this work stuff. So again, I think that's a very personal conversation for every person, but it's one that you have to start to have. Like, I see men doing this with working a lot and being away, yet they'll say family is important to them. And then they'll rationalize it by saying, well, I have to provide for my family. And I think, that's just something that we should push back on, to say, well, what does provision for your family look like? What does it have to look like? What do you want it to look like?
And at what expense,
Right.
I mean, is it the brand new car or the newer house versus being gone from your family and traveling so much that you're not around your kids? You and I have had that conversation when we started Rocksolid Families. We were trying to make it available when people were available. And so a lot of that was in the evenings and weekends. And so we found ourselves sacrificing our own family dinner time. And then we realized, like, okay, here we are trying to promote families and say they're important, but we don't have our own family dinner time. And so we had to protect that, right? We cut back on our schedule, especially late in the evenings, and really protected that being home with dinner time with our family and not having to go back all night long because we say family's important.
Yeah. Yeah. Where, hon, is it hard for you to step away from work or from unplugging? Like, what pulls you back in to say, I need to get this done? What's your draw? Is it? It can't be money because
we work for a nonprofit.
We work for a nonprofit. So what is it for you that draws you in?
Probably the expectations I put on myself. You know, it's really not other people. Because we work for ourselves. So
Right.
I don't have a boss. I used to have a boss that had pretty high expectations. And so I kept feeling like I'm jumping that
Right.
bar, right? But I can't even blame that anymore. I think it's the expectations I put on myself, the pressure to perform that makes me a good person or a good Christian if I perform this or I do what other people expect me to do. And I learned that growing up, like how to jump. So I had to realize what healthy boundaries look like. I'm not always perfect at it, but they are a really important topic to me because I know that without them, we do kind of make sacrifices that are unhealthy for us. So I don't know. What do you think? You're the observer.
For you or for me?
For me, and then I'll ask you that question.
I think is for you. You are an achiever. You like metrics. And you like to weigh and measure those kinds of things. And so, like if it were up to me, I wouldn't look at metrics because I'd be like, well, are we busy or not? Not that I wouldn't look at them, but I take a quick glance and then I get away because I don't want the metrics to guide our family, which is, it's not necessarily the right thing at all because I think sometimes I miss the mark on, we could be doing better, right? But I think, you have always, you like that you make to-do list every day and then you check off the box.
Sometimes I have to write it on the to-do list so I can mark it off the to-do list.
Yeah, she goes back. She did it 2 hours ago and she writes it on the list.
Because it was on my list.
She marks it off. So I think you're wired for accomplishment that way. And that's not good or bad. It's how you operate. I think in fact, it's been very good in a lot of ways. But I think if it jumps into your mind, it becomes a to-do.
Yeah.
Because even though like we were just traveling, we were traveling a lot and you still did not unplug. I mean, when we were in the car, and again, I'm not going to, there's nothing else for you to do. You're sitting in the passenger side.
Yeah.
So, but your brain didn't stop with to-dos.
Yeah.
And so you kept on going with that, which, is just, I think you're wired to feel like you will use the phrase, I felt productive today. And again, I would be the other way of the office work seldom makes me feel productive. But going out and building a wall.
Yeah, we talked about that wall last week.
Doing the kitchen, doing those kinds of things, like I can stay at that stuff. Yeah. And it's like,
I thought it was funny. The day of the banquet or the day before the banquet, you were working on cleaning up the garage. Right. And so like that would be way down on my list. And so you just mentioned just today about how you were going to break down this old cabinet and replace it with something else. Right. But you're like, I kind of thought that maybe on the day of the banquet, that probably wouldn't have been a good idea.
But it was on my mind. I could have done it. Like that could have been motivating.
Because garbage day was the next day, right?
Yeah.
In your mind, like that would have been a very productive move.
Yeah.
But you got wise and said, no, probably not.
Why are you not up here working?
As my wife's running around like crazy.
I do think, hun, for you or for me or anything, it's we feel valuable when we are feeling productive. Whether I'm building something or you're doing something, on the computer or whatever, it's that idea that you're getting fed there. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think the question for me always is, at what expense?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So is it coming at the expense of our family time or kids or you and I together, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's the question, more of the pushback that I would have with people that are listening today. It's like, we're not saying that being busy is bad. What we're saying is, what's it cost you? Nothing comes free, right? Everything, if it takes energy, that means it comes at a cost. And so what did you pay for it?
So I also want to address this concept, because this used to be me, that my worth and value came from my productivity or how much I gave back. You and I have always worked for nonprofits. We've never worked for a for-profit business. So it's always been like a church or a school or now a nonprofit. And so I always felt like I had this expectation that others had put on me of what that value looked like. But I am learning through my age that my worth and value does not come from my productivity or what people say about me. It's what God says about me. And so that's the work we do a lot with, especially for me, women, like, what that friend says, what that spouse says, what that boss says about you is not how God sees you. And so that's where we want to get to also, is like, are you pleasing the Lord? Is what you're doing today bringing him glory? Is it using your gifts and talents to the fullest, or are you robbing God, right, of your tithes and offerings and of your talents and treasures? And so that's it's the audience of one. It's the judge of God Almighty, of like, am I pleasing him, is really where I need to look.
But also, I completely agree, but also not getting into works, salvation through works. So I've got my gifts, and boy, I'm out working everybody, and so I should be on the top of the list.
But faith without deeds is dead. I can't just sit there on my hands saying, oh, God loves me no matter what, and I don't have to do anything. I had a professor at the Bible college. We are saved by grace through faith in baptism for good works. So the good works is the byproduct, like you said, of wanting to please him, wanting to love him, wanting to show his glory and manifestation of who he is in our life. And so it's not to earn his love. It's because of his love. I want to do these things. And that's what drives me today. It really is. And I get jazzed up about that. And I don't want to stop for him. Right. But I do know, and this is where we're getting at today, we all need rest, right? Yeah. We all need refueling. And that's where, I have a verse here, Jesus, these are Jesus's words. It says, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light." So we're all going to carry something. We're not supposed to just sit here and do nothing. But it's when we do it for him and we allow him to lead, that's when we find rest. Yeah.
I'm just reminded on just how we approach life, the Mary and Martha story about when Jesus comes in.
Yeah, I don't like that story.
Well, but I'm reminded of just Mary was at rest. She was at peace, and she was in his company. And from the outside, it looked like she's doing nothing. Right? It looks like she's doing nothing. And Martha's actually getting upset because she's busy. She's busy and she's working. And so just being in his peace, in his time, I think that across the board, I think we could see that our culture is just not there. We can't even, like, that cell phone of ours has got to be clicking and ticking all the time to keep us entertained, right? We have to come into the house. We have to turn stuff on. We have to be constantly aroused by whatever stimulation's out there. And I think that's just another way that Satan says, can you just sit? Can you just be in silence? And I think one of the words that came to our show with the Big Orexia is, where's just that simple gratitude of, when we did just take a week away, and so often we did nothing. And
do you want to walk or do you want to ride a bike?
And we did kind of nothing, and that was the peace. And we were thankful for it. We're like, it's just been really good to not have to, playing cards and
losing money. My dad just took me for a ride.
The recreation part.
Yeah, but I want to go back to that story, and I'm glad you brought it up. Luke chapter 10. Okay, it's the only gospel that tells the story of Jesus visiting the home of Mary and Martha, and Martha welcomed Jesus into her home, and her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he taught. That's verse 39. And verse 40 says, but Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing, she came to Jesus and said, "Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits there, sits there while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me." So I remember that story just hitting me between the eyes because I was such a Martha. That I was like busy. And then I felt martyrdom by not being recognized and other people helping me because my love language is acts of service. So I love by doing. But then Jesus's words came back in verse 41 and said, the Lord said to her, "My dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. And Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her."
Yeah.
One thing. I'm looking for one thing, and that's full devotion to him is what he was saying. And that's what Mary was doing and Martha was missing. Yeah. And that's what I do when I get distracted.
And full devotion, not full work, right? Not full busy. Because was Martha doing something wrong? No, she was preparing a meal for Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? But there was something even greater than a meal for Jesus. It was being in his presence and being at peace with him, right? And so, like, it's just that whole us recognizing we're just raised to be with a capitalistic society, work harder, make your own way, and those are great things. Like, I'm not taking away from any of that. But I think that can become our God.
Well, yeah, because the Bible says you don't work, you don't eat. Right. So there is this expectation of, carrying your own load, the Bible says, and to doing your own work. And faith without deeds is dead. But then we have to balance that with that devotion to the Lord first. Right. And we talked about that last week about God, spouse, children. And that ministry's down here and volunteer work's going down here and our jobs are down here. And we just can't prioritize those over the Lord. Yeah. And that's what you and we spent a lot of time this past week just giving him praise, resting at his feet, just really refueling and refocusing so that we can come back and do the work that he's called us to do. Yeah. But to do it with a full cup and a steady hand.
Yeah. So how about a challenge out there? So the idea here is you guys starting to look at your life. Like on a regular basis, couples come to us. Or individuals come to us and say, "Oh my gosh, we're so busy. We're driving the kids all over. We're a taxi service. We're this and we're that." How about you just take a look? Take a look at your life and think about where am I getting peace? Where's the peace, right? Where's a little bit of solitude? Where is that coming from? Where am I putting it into my life intentionally, right, versus just randomly? And then making some decisions about how you can protect it better. I think there's importance to in recognizing certain seasons that we're in. There are, like, right before our banquet, we all said, hey, we're coming into a busy season, right? So the weeks that led up to it, it's just kind of all hands on deck. But if that was always that way,
can't have that rhythm
you will lose people, right?
Yeah.
And so that idea, like, well, what's our season going to be? How are we going to handle just having some peace, building that in?
Yeah. Our daughter just spent a couple weeks nannying for a family, and she was the chauffeur. Of kids going in every direction. And she was like, "Oh dear." That was a lot. And she's like, I couldn't get anything done. She's like, there was no time. And so I told her, I said, you're at the mercy of that family, but when you have your own family, this is when mom and dad have to use the word no. No, you're not going to go running all over the town. No, you're not going to play those 3 sports in one season. Right. No, you're not going to, expect me to do this and this. Like, the word no is a complete sentence. And it's sometimes important because parents think if I say no, that makes me a bad mom or then I'm selfish. And honestly, we've got to help our kids find that rhythm, right? That's healthy and balanced. Yeah. And because sometimes we let the kids kind of call the shots and run the schedule, we're at their mercy and then we're exhausted and then we get short with them. And it's like, there's a reason why it was too much.
Yeah. Yeah. There's that fine line, guys, between being busy and being lazy. There's that fine line somewhere in the middle. I think sometimes it's not either one. It's more of what you're doing with your thoughts and the energy that you have. Like, where are you directing it, right? If you're laying on the couch, does that mean you're lazy? Not necessarily. You could just be resting from being busy. But if you're laying on the couch all the time and not being productive, then that's probably worse in many ways than being too busy. So the idea here is finding that middle ground. And then at the end of the day, being that Mary and saying, all things are going to be in the time of Christ. I'm sitting with Christ. And so that's going to be my goal here.
Yeah. So we did, like you said, we walked, we ran, we rode bikes. I did a little shopping, and one of the mugs I bought, it says "Walk in Faith," and I feel like that's a mantra that I've used for a long time. One of my favorite songs, Jeremy Camp, is "I will walk by faith," and so even when I cannot see, and so sometimes when we unplug, we think, "Oh my gosh, like it won't get done."
Right.
God does provide.
Right.
When you trust in him, when you prioritize him. And so that's where we have to walk in faith and say, okay, I know that I've got all this work to do, but I'm going to unplug and I'm going to read my Bible, or I'm going to pray, or I'm going to take a nap, or, go for a walk or whatever. And it's amazing how God does provide what you need when you prioritize him and when you rest and trust in him.
Yeah. He will give you the desires of your heart.
Yes. When you delight in him, it says.
Right. And so rather than you thinking it's important and you should desire it, he will put on your heart what you should be doing with your time and your desires. So
Proverbs.
I just think that's just, for me, that's been a big thing of recognizing that sometimes the things that are on my heart are of me. And they're not of Christ. And when it's like, when I try to align with him, then what's on my heart.
Yeah. I think of Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, where it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, and in all your ways acknowledge him. And everything you do, acknowledge him, put him first, and he will make your path straight. And that's what I trust in. And I love that verse. I memorize that verse. I teach those to the kids all the time. And that's just a reminder for all of us. Like, he will make our path straight, even when we don't understand it.
Yeah. All right. You got anything else?
That's all I got, man.
Yeah.
I'm thankful. I'm thankful to the Lord that we had the opportunity to unplug. I'm thankful to our sponsors and our partners who walk alongside us and realize that even when we're resting, we're still following the Lord and we're still faithful to the mission and the vision. But that rhythm is really important. And I hope whatever you do, whatever you're plugged in with and what you're doing, that you do it in the pace that the Lord has asked you to do, and that honors him, and that it also is sustainable for you.
I was just going to use that word, that you can sustain it.
Over a long period of time. Yeah, that's the key.
Yeah, because a lot of us can work in surges, right?
Sure.
But to be able to sustain it, I think is really important.
Yep.
All right, guys, we hope that you've had some rest in your life. We hope that you've had an opportunity to prioritize what's really important. And if not, this is your opportunity to step back and maybe take some of that time to reprioritize and put God up at the top, and then everything else that follows after that. We want to thank our sponsors. We want to thank Maxwell Construction, Casey's Outdoor Solutions, and the Hoosier Ice House for sponsoring the Rocksolid Family, I almost said Strong Dance, the Rocksolid Family Podcast. We also just want to thank all of you guys. We just coming off of our banquet again are reminded of the great community that we live in and the number of people who believe that God is the Lord of their life, and they want to try to do what they can to live that way, not with perfection, where that's not something we're trying to hold up to, but the idea that we're just trying to be authentically putting God as a priority. So we just want to thank everyone here in our community. So I think that's all we got.
Yeah. So again, if you didn't have a chance to listen to last week's show, where we really just celebrated all God did at that banquet in the past 7 years, go back and check it out. And 2 weeks ago, remember, we talked about the 8 areas of our life and how you can be winning in those 8 areas, including recreation and margin and having a chance to unplug. So check those things out. Please give us a 5-star rating. We don't ask that just for bragging rights. It really does up us on the platforms and the algorithms. So we really would love to get this messaging out because there's so many people who are stressed out and running at a pace that's not sustainable and not honoring to the Lord. So thank you so much for listening to the Rocksolid Families Podcast, to Merrill and I, building a stronger community, one family at a time. Make it a great day.
Rocksolid Families wants to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions for sponsoring the Rocksolid Families Podcast. Casey's has grown to be one of the largest and most unique garden centers and gift shops in the Cincinnati tri-state area. Whether you are looking to take on that next landscape project or simply add a little home decor to your house, Casey's has you covered. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Call them today at 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home. Rocksolid Families wants to thank Maxwell Construction for sponsoring the Rocksolid Families Podcast. For over 30 years, Maxwell Construction has been a leader in turning dreams into realities, building schools, banks, restaurants, and many other commercial and public facilities. Maxwell Construction has made it their priority to not just build buildings, but to build into their community. So if you have any construction needs, call them at 812-537-2200.
Rocksolid Families would like to thank Hoosier Ice House for being a proud sponsor of the Rocksolid Families Podcast. In the heart of historic Lawrenceburg, Indiana, the Ice House is at the corner of Vine and High Streets. The historic building evokes a feeling of comfort with spacious indoor and outdoor dining, a large bar, and comfortable dining areas. Large enough to host parties, yet intimate enough to feel like your favorite neighborhood restaurant. So thank you again for the Hoosier Ice House for sponsoring the Rocksolid Families Podcast.